This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where it's all about getting the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Brought to you by Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com. And now, here's your host, Itamar Shafir.
Welcome to the Umbrella Marketing Podcast, where we talk with successful marketing experts about ways to build and grow your digital marketing agency. My guest today is a known speaker, an accomplished author who founded one of the best-known SEO brands in the world, one that I use many times, Moz, and took it to over $30 million in sales. He's also the co-founder and CEO of Sparktoro. I'm excited to say hello to Mr. Rand Fishkin. Hi, Rand.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome, Rand. So as you know, in the Umbrella Marketing Podcast, as we discussed, we're trying to help marketing agencies grow in many, many different ways. But before we get into it, since you are so accomplished, have done so much as an entrepreneur and as a writer, I think our guests, our listeners would benefit much from just hearing a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I, as you mentioned, started a company called Moz. Originally, Moz was a blog and a consulting business. So, for folks who have been around in digital marketing for a number of years, I started that website in 2003. It was sort of a blog where I shared SEO experiences and eventually built up kind of this content marketing hub before content marketing was even a term that we used. And attracted, a relatively significant audience, at which point the company transitioned to being a software company. So I launched a set of subscribable tools, one of the first software as a service products in the SEO space. And over the next 7 years, I grew that to, from a nothing to $30 million in revenue. And it's amazing what happens when you are already attracting the audience that's the perfect fit for your product.
Yeah.
And so by virtue of that blog, the business really built itself up. I started a video series called Whiteboard Friday that a lot of folks are familiar with, and many folks know me from that, having watched those videos over the years, especially a lot of agency folks. I speak at a lot of conferences and events, especially prior to COVID. And 2018, I left Moz, started this new company, Sparktoro, the next day. And Sparktoro is in the audience intelligence and market research space. So essentially helping businesses of all kinds understand who their customers are and what they pay attention to so that they can do marketing of all kinds in those places and with those sources. And at the same time that I left Moz, I released a book called Lost and Founder, which has been, relatively well received. I just got my sales update from my publisher, Penguin Random House, and they seem to be pretty happy. So good. I think that's a good thing.
If the penguins are happy, you're happy.
Exactly.
I have to tell you, by the way, I love Moz. I'm sure all the listeners here know Moz and appreciate the blog and appreciate the tools. To this day, I think we have a webinar talking about our pay-per-result SEO. In the webinar, we look at Moz research for how much agencies are selling SEO. You did research in a few countries, and it was super important for us as a company that deal with that all the time to kind of find the right benchmark for the prices. That's awesome. So I have to commend you on not just the financial success. It was one of those brands that kind of, that's a real value for me. Like, that's a super value. It's not a tool. Well, then it was also a tool, but it was a super value brand. I think you actually managed to create a little bit, kind of a little bit of a love brand inside that ecosystem, which is hard to do. So absolutely. I commend you for that.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to hear that the survey data, the agency survey data, was useful. I think that was a project, I want to say, that I launched in maybe 2014 or 15 after someone like yourself, emailed and said, "Hey, Rand, I'm trying to figure out, how we should pricing. Do you have an article about this?" And I was like, "I don't have an article about that. I don't do agency pricing myself. I know what I should do. I should survey all the Moz users," right? And this, I think, helped gather a ton of data about how digital marketing agencies do their pricing. And how they hire people, all that kind of stuff.
A ton. It was super important. We have, I think, 750 agencies selling SEO. This is helpful. Of course, we mentioned Moz.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I should
course.
do that again. There's no reason not to update it in 2021.
I think, and now you should do it for
for Sparktoro. Why not?
Yeah. So okay. So speaking about Sparktoro, Sparktoro is also about helping brands and helping agencies doing marketing, and kind of in a different way than SEO, because you're now focusing on info on the personas, right? That you should target and how you should target them. And you and I talked before we started the podcast about this podcast is about helping agencies.
Yeah.
So how does that help agencies?
Yeah, I mean, so Itamar, I'm really challenged to find a competitive advantage, a consistent competitive advantage with SEO anymore. I think, there was this long period of Google's sort of growth and rise to dominate the industry. I'm sure you remember, right? Like, 1997 to about maybe 2014, 2015, like even tiny small businesses, if you built something valuable on the web and, did your SEO with it, got your keyword research and worked on your content, got your links built, you could outrank, a lot of your competitors. Like you could be number one, number two, number three. Today, there's really three problems that are challenging that dramatically. The first is a massive amount of competition. Like every single brand that wasn't online before the pandemic is online today. I don't care how big or small you were, over the last 18 months, every single brand all around the world. So this just means massively more competition. And that was even true pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. The second thing is Google has become a machine learning first search engine. And the machine learning signals interpret a much wider range of potential ranking inputs than what was previously sort of hand selected by a bunch of engineers sitting in a room together. And so when that happens, when the machine learning system took over Google, you started to see a strong preference that was already existing, but a stronger preference for brands ranking at the very top of the results. Mm-hmm. Brands that people knew, trusted, preferred to click on. It was, the era of being able to build your brand with SEO kind of went away, and SEO became an amazing opportunity for already existing strong brands. So if you're Peloton, SEO is a great opportunity, right? Because you've already got a strong brand and lots of people know you. If you're Airbnb built their SEO and content strategy the last 4 or 5 years, right? That's not how they built their brand, but once they had a great brand, then they executed on SEO and content. And this is true for so many more, Canva and Stripe and Shopify and Etsy, like all these brands essentially got to a place of power and influence, and then they executed on SEO and content. So that's the second problem. And then the third and last one is, and I just released some research about this last week, basically keeping 2/3 of all the searches that happen on google.com inside of Google's walled garden. Like for every 100 searches that are performed, about 65 of them, maybe a little more than that, stay on Google. They don't click to another website. This opportunity, this is some research I did with SimilarWeb, which Google wrote sort of a semi-retaliatory blog post about, but didn't offer their own numbers.
I can go into a conversation just about that for 2 hours on. That's super interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, right? And the research, the reaction was interesting. I think the data by itself is interesting. The variance is super high. We looked at some very specific examples, like you search for Apple iPhone XS. Right. And of all the searches, right, many thousands of searches that were performed for that particular keyword phrase in 2020, SimilarWeb looked and, hey, the click-through rate is almost 65%, right? So Google's only keeping a little over 1/3 of those searches. Then you go to something like Donald Trump age, 95% are kept on Google. Like, no, you see the number. Google provides an instant answer. You don't have to click. Nobody goes anywhere, right? So you've got this sort of wide range of stuff. But because of these three things, my perspective for digital marketing agencies and the folks that they're helping is, if you can go help them build their brand online and off before you start doing SEO and content, you're going to have an amazing time. Like, the SEO and content equation is essentially have a brand that people love, trust, like clicking on, get them to search for your brand and branded terms, and then execute on that with high quality SEO and content after you've built it.
So let me ask you, if we're talking about a very small business, a local business, not Stripe, right? We're talking about, I don't know, a local HVAC. So you're saying start with the branding first, even start with small budget advertising, get the clicks, get the likes, and then move into SEO?
Yeah, exactly, right? So I'm saying, if you are, if you're a local business, a small business, a medium-sized business, a new startup on the web, a new content business, you're building a newsletter, whatever it is, I would try and find the sources of influence that reach your audience. So, if that's in HVAC world, maybe that is places like, I don't know, it's Yelp and Nextdoor and your local newspaper publication, and maybe there's a local weekly, and maybe there's a few newsletters that people in the neighborhoods that you serve subscribe to, and perhaps there's a few popular Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram accounts that people are following. Those could be individuals, or they might be publications that are associated with other media brands. Maybe there's podcasts that are local, or a neighborhood blog. Those are the spots. That's where I think they're not very crowded. They don't receive tons of pitches all day, every day, especially not from people with interesting, data about, hey, did you know that the Ballard neighborhood, we surveyed 500 of our HVAC customers over the last 3 years, and we found, all these amazing data points about what's going on with, cooling systems, and like how, how climate change is impacting Seattle homeowners. Boom. That is the kind of content. You don't need any SEO for it. You produce that, you make some good graphs and charts, you've got a decent methodology. Boom. Every news outlet in your local region is going to pick that up. Podcasters are going to be thrilled to have you. Yes, come on the KPLU podcast and talk to us about, what you're discovering. Amazing.
Yeah.
Right? It's that kind of thing where essentially you are finding angles of interest for the publications that reach your audience, the sources of influence that reach your audience, and pitching them, doing outreach, doing that work in whatever ways resonate. It's going to be different for every different field and every different person, but I think this is where a great digital marketing agency can really make a huge difference, because these SMB owners, they can't do it themselves.
Yeah, they can't. Completely can't. I agree with you. So let's even take it to a more practical step. Okay, Rand, I'm a small agency. I work in Atlanta. I want to help a dentist client. But you know what? Let me go with something maybe that we can write a little bit more about. Let's say a plastic surgeon.
Okay, yeah.
That's kind of more consumerish, lifestyle-ish. What is my first step? Like, I'm not a super marketer. I'm a marketer.
Yeah.
But, I'm not Rand Fishkin yet. So,
hey, you're probably, I will say this, if you are serving a niche community in a local area, you're probably a better marketer than I am, right? You probably have a better idea of what the local publications and people and sources of influence are, and what they'll pay attention to, and what can get amplified and broadcasted. But Itamar, let's start from zero. Let's assume you have none of that knowledge.
Right.
My recommendation would be, I would first have conversations with your clients' customers. So, you go talk to a plastic surgeon and you say, hey, could we talk to a few of your happy customers and get a sense of what brought them to you, and what they, what sorts of research they did before they came to you, and what they paid attention to, and hey, right, let's ask a few of those questions. Just a few 20, 30-minute interviews over Zoom or a phone call or a coffee or whatever it is. Invaluable. You will gain so much knowledge about, deep knowledge about. And the second thing that I would do is I would run a survey. I would ideally run it to, if there's an email list of customers or potential customers, maybe people who signed up, even if they didn't come into the plastic surgery clinic, but they, maybe they scheduled an appointment, or they signed up for a newsletter, or whatever it is, they gave their email somehow. even if you have none of those, you could use a tool like SurveyMonkey Audience, right? And narrow in or run some Facebook ads to capture some survey, get 100, 200 answers. Oh, okay, people in Atlanta who are considering plastic surgery did these things. They thought about these things. They had these problems. They described their problems in these ways. You can figure out what the right questions are to ask based on what the client, says their goals of marketing are. But then you take that data and the interview data and you can combine that into, here is our marketing research. This gives us the roadmap for, in order to compellingly reach this audience that's interested in plastic surgery in Atlanta, we should be in these types of publications and sources of influence. If you want, there's a few tools that help you do this online. They basically crawl social and web data and then aggregate it together.
Right.
My company, Sparktoro, is one of the tools that does this, but there's a couple other good ones. One that I like is called Audience, but instead of spelled with a C, it's spelled with an S.
Okay. Audience.
Audience with an S. Another one is called Helixa.ai. And a third that I really like and did some work with is SimilarWeb, right? So SimilarWeb aggregates a ton of, hey, people who visit, go whatever it is. You want to find people who visit Real Self, which is like a plastic surgery research site, actually started by a sort of colleague of mine here in the Seattle area. People who visit that website, what other websites do they visit? You can get that for free from SimilarWeb. Just go to similarweb.com, you scroll down, they'll show you what other websites people visited. So now you've got a bunch of data from whatever, Sparktoro and SimilarWeb and these other places showing you, okay, here's this audience, here's what they say they're interested in. Here's sort of our experiential learnings from those interviews. Here's the sources of influence they pay attention to. That's a marketing roadmap, my friends. Like that is essentially, okay, we are going to do these interesting things on the content side, on the pitching side, on the outreach side, on the product side, on the presentation side, on the way we talk about what we do on our website, on the call to action, on the whatever, on an email newsletter, on getting our doc on a bunch of podcasts, on getting them in front of people on webinars, in having whatever, like
right.
You've got your tactics and you can craft your strategy and then you match them up. So if it's, hey, we are going to present the top 10 objections, and we're going to market that top 10 objections to plastic surgery and concerns that people have and help get them over the hump, because our primary marketing challenge is convincing people who are interested to actually come in and schedule an appointment, a consult. Right? And if that's the case, then a lot of your learning is going to be focused on that conversion hump, right? And getting over that. Or it could be, hey, we do great with conversion. Once somebody gets to our website and enters their email, they're in. Our problem is traffic. We need high quality, relevant traffic. Okay, so let's start with, how do we find the publications and people and sources of influence that reach our market and get in front of them with something that they are interested in, so that they'll cover and write about us and talk about us and amplify us to the audience that needs to hear from us.
And do you think, let's say I'm using Sparktoro to do that, and I have the set publications that I need, would you say, and I'm not a great copywriter, and I'm not sure about my ability, for example, to prepare, well-crafted content that will be super interesting for those publications, but hey, they offer advertising. I have the dollars to buy them. That works, right?
What's beautiful about that too, in a lot of those cases, you can, call up the ad team at your favorite podcast that reaches your audience, and you could say like, hey, we want to sponsor the show.
This podcast is brought to you by Umbrella. Have an agency? Check out umbrellaus.com to grow it today.
You would be shocked, right? The cost per 1,000 impressions to a highly relevant audience that is the people that you want to reach can be so much lower than paying whatever it is, $8, $10, $15 a click on Google or Facebook.
Right.
Especially in plastic surgery. I mean, plastic surgery, the numbers are probably 30, 40, 50.
Yeah.
So you're just talking about crazy, crazy numbers. And a lot of times, no offense, like Facebook and Google advertising can be quite effective, but in most cases, what happens in most markets is there's enough people bidding on them and the traffic is worth, let's say the return on investment that you can get is, I don't know, $85 a click. Google's goal, Facebook's goal is to charge you $84.99. That's their incentive, right? Like they want to maximize they want to come right up to the point where you will stop advertising because the profit margin just isn't there, and extract every last dollar. And they rely on the fact that everybody uses them to bid up to that point, right? So that they can learn over time. They have enough data and sophisticated algorithms to figure that out. And of course, the market incentivizes them to grow their ad earnings every quarter. That's a nightmare for a small business owner. How are you going to make a profit? You got to find sources that aren't crowded with competition, that don't have, thousands of engineers in Mountain View, California, paid 6 figures a year to find algorithms that will maximize their profit and minimize yours.
I agree completely. So I'm going to my client, I'm starting that pitch, and unlike coming with some sort of specific offer, this is a more, hey, let's strategize and build something for the long run. So would you say, if I'm prospecting, it's not my client yet, I'm prospecting, coming into the prospect conversation, the client discovery conversation, with that idea of the methodology in the back end, do you think that's too much, or do you think that's exactly what they'll appreciate?
Yeah, I think what you want to do is, and this is a great way to differentiate yourself as an agency, right? To basically say, look, we can help you with SEO, right? We've helped people get rankings. We've helped people produce content. We've helped them, get an email newsletter set up, get their social media marketing presence set up. We can do all of those things, but it's going to be difficult to get a competitive advantage with just those things alone. And if you want us to, we will manage your ad spend on Facebook and Google. We will help, bring you the best return on investment we can. We'll help you with negative keyword optimization, blah, 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 blah. However, if you want to build a true marketing competitive advantage, a flywheel that scales with decreasing friction over time, you are going to want to build up a brand that people know, like, trust, and associate with solving this problem in this space in your region better than anyone else. And that is something that will be very hard to take away from you for decades to come. No matter how much somebody else spends on Google Ads, that's tough to take away. I'm sure, Itamar, I'm sure you can think of, in your hometown in Israel, here in the United States, you can think of places where you have like a deep personal association with your local, your favorite coffee shop.
Yeah, of course.
Your favorite local retail store where you buy things. I have a furniture store I love. I have a sushi shop in Ballard that I love, near my house. It's going to be really tough for someone to advertise their way out of the brand loyalty that I feel to those places.
I agree 100%. Unless you're already on the move or it's transactional, then yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
So I love it. So it's pretty much a formulated way for branding. And just to recap for our members, guys, you don't have to be the smartest, most successful marketer. Grab a few clients, or even if you're just prospecting, start this is your path towards branding that would lead you towards success, and then move into those conversations, and then use Sparktoro to kind of find that data that you need to find the locations where you need to advertise and brand. And it's perfectly fine that we're talking about Sparktoro, because I wanted to talk about it anyways. If I'm going to Sparktoro now, and I bet a lot of listeners after this, after this podcast,
I do want to say, I'm very sensitive about promoting my own stuff. I feel, almost bad and wrong about it. But the nice thing about Sparktoro is it's free. So you can set up a free account, you can do some searches, you can find a ton of people, especially marketers, get a lot of value from just using the free version. And so I super encourage you to do that. I encourage you to check out the free version of SimilarWeb. Audience has, I think you can run one search through them and get a demo and a free analysis. Some of these tools, you can get a lot of the value that we're talking about, where you discover those sources of influences and present them to your client. And then if your client signs up, if they're like, Oh, I am in. Yeah, give it to me, baby. This is great. Okay, now you can go, choose your favorite tool, pay them some money, bill that to your client, and use the full process that you need. But this is a great way to start off that conversation and break out of the duopoly.
I completely agree. A lot of times we recommend of doing the freemiums and the free tools before. Yeah, definitely. The only thing I usually don't talk about tools so much with the people that I interview. The fact is, and I started this, and I'm not embarrassed. I love Moz. So I don't care. You built it, so I pretty much that already transferred my trust in Sparktoro enough to talk about it. But the reason I also want to talk about it is because I want to be very tactical on the podcast. And you were very tactical about defining the 3 steps you think that they should take. Just in a few sentences, if you can encapsulate, not in a promotional way, but just for people to understand what exactly Sparktoro does. You come in and then you type something, and what happens?
Right. So I, for example, I just did a search. I was helping someone who's in the recipes world, right? So she runs a cooking blog, and she sells products through the cooking blog, mostly an affiliate model. But one woman show. So I looked for. I did the search. My audience frequently uses the hashtag Japanese food. There's a drop down. You can choose a number of different ways to search. But in this case, we knew that a lot of the people who come to her website are interested in Japanese cooking and Japanese cuisine. So great. My audience uses the hashtag Japanese food. And then Sparktoro basically pulls back and says, okay, our database found 3,200 people who in the last 90 days used the hashtag Japanese food on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, Facebook, all these places. And here are characteristics and attributes of that audience. Like, what else did they talk about? And right now, what's fascinating is, on the rise are terms like cherry blossoms, fried chicken, pork belly, ramen. What is this? Wait, I'm not exactly sure. Oh, izakaya. Okay, that's like a Japanese style bar. So okay, so I can see a bunch of content topics that are resonant with this audience, which can potentially inform some of the content strategy or ideation that she might have around what she's going to do. And then it'll show me social accounts that this audience engages with most. It'll show me websites that they visit the most. It'll show me podcasts that they listen to. I'd never heard of this, but it sounds amazing. Deep dive from the Japan Times. 10% of this audience engages with this podcast online. And apparently Japan Times journalists get interviewed by this guy, Oscar Boyd, on this podcast, which runs in English here in the US. Oh my God. Yeah. Are you kidding me? Like, there you go. Boom. Right. And then, and you can find media sources. So Serious Eats, which is an American recipe website, but apparently very popular with Japanese people who make Japanese food or want to at home. Boom. Like, this is, this is golden stuff. You will probably find some of these sources if you were to do Google searches for Japanese food. But what you will not know is whether the audience that talks about them online actually pays attention to those sources and which ones and how much. So if it says, whatever it is, 10.6% have engaged with Bon Appetit magazine in the last 90 days. And Japan Travel Advice has got nearly that much. I bet I could pitch Japan Travel Advice much more easily than I could pitch Bon Appetit. Yeah. I'm going to reach out to them.
That's perfect. I love it. I get it. I get it completely. I'm going to use it. For Umbrella.
It can be really fun. Like, you'll find fascinating stuff in there, and you can apply it to, if you're running like Facebook ad campaigns or Twitter ad campaigns, LinkedIn ad campaigns, you can take the hashtags and the topics and like plug them directly into the audience builder for those services and go, oh, perfect. This is who I can reach and potentially get a little more advantage over your competitors who might not be as so well informed.
Yeah.
Same thing with SEO and content and keywords and all that stuff.
Completely. there's also one thing we talk about in this podcast, which is the entrepreneurship part of it. And I always ask successful people the same question. Having worked with a lot of people, manage or, have colleagues and friends that are also successful, maybe those who are less successful, those who have tried and those who have succeeded and those who have not. Do you find a pattern that you would recommend? Do you find a pattern of successful people versus unsuccessful people of what to avoid or what should be done?
I think the most interesting part of the question is the definition of success, which changes so dramatically depending on who you are talking to and when you talk to them. So, for example, a lot of folks think that I was very successful at Moz, right? They're like, oh man, that company's doing whatever, $50 million in revenue and they got 25,000 plus customers and, Rand must be successful. And, look, I think obviously I did reasonably well. I had a nice salary while I was there. I still own 17% of the company. So potentially maybe someday if something happens with it, yeah, maybe it'll turn into lots of money. But when I left Moz, I started Sparktoro the next day, not just for the sort of marketing, audience building aspect of it, but also because I needed to make money quickly, right? Like I have my rent to pay and bills and food and, travel and all the things that I like to do. So it is really interesting for me to talk to a lot of agency owners who I'm friends with a ton of folks who own digital marketing agencies. And when they learn that their companies are more, sort of financially lucrative and successful for them and their co-founders and even sometimes their executive team than what Moz was for me, they're shocked. They're like,
wow,
how is that possible? Right? Like my agency's never even done $5 million in revenue a year. You were doing 50. And this is the thing about being, about how you structure your life and your business. Moz, I raised $30 million in venture capital. And so until or unless the company sells, right, has an exit, that money is illiquid, right? The ownership is illiquid. I could never pay myself profits from the business. So even though Moz probably made, was profitable to the tune of $5 million last year, I'm not going to see any of that, money. I think another thing to realize is what success means outside of finances. And I think that it is actually a really great thing as you get older to start to realize, oh, there's an amount of money where my life will not be all that different in meaningful ways if I have more than that.
I agree.
And also, if I can reach that level and maintain it, then what I really want is a life that is rich with the other things that I love. Sometimes that's time off. Sometimes that's interesting projects you love working on. Sometimes it's growth in your own intellectual capacity. Sometimes it's helping a certain type of person or business. I know a lot of agency owners who they just thrive and love helping other businesses succeed, helping other people, seeing them take off and seeing their clients who they worked with 5 years ago, go from, oh, things are really rocky to, oh my gosh, we've got a funnel that really works for us and is driving customers to our door. And look at us, like we're surviving and thriving despite that. That's their sense of wonderment. But for some reason, I think it's like the hyper capitalistic culture of the US and the West. A lot of folks don't think that's success. They don't label that as successful in their own minds. And so they view themselves as not successful compared to, I don't know him personally, but I don't think Jeff Bezos's life is good. Like, I don't think.
No, I wasn't go so far. I was saying, agency owners who, successful practices more of moving forward.
and look at me, just like taking that and just running 10,000 miles.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Actually, one of the best answers. I got 2 questions instead of that. Thank you. That was great. I won't ask you any more questions.
So change your definition of success. And I have seen a lot of agency owners who can change their definition of success to be a full definition, not just a financial one, be much happier and more successful than the ones who can't. So that is my advice.
I appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners appreciate it too. So the last thing we have for today is a very quick rapid Q&A.
Ooh, sweet.
I'm going to ask you a few questions. If something feels uncomfortable for you, just say pass. Although I'm just going to ask it again, so don't say it. And it's just short answers, right? It's not like an association questionnaire, but short answers, quick questions. You ready?
Ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Did you get along with your parents growing up?
My mom always, my dad until I went through puberty.
I get that. Do you have siblings?
I do. I've got a younger brother and a younger sister.
Do you have a pet?
I don't have a pet. I had a couple of frogs for a while. They both died. They don't live very long.
Frogs don't count.
No.
Do you have kids?
No kids.
Do you? When do you wake up?
Well, embarrassingly, even though I'm in the Pacific time zone, I wake up usually between 9 and 9:30 a.m., sometimes as late as 10.
It's good. Okay, so moving on to my next question. When do you go to bed?
12:30 and 2 a.m.
Okay, so you're pretty lazy. Ideal vacation?
Ooh, I love exploring new places, especially we had a trip booked to Costa Rica this year that got canceled because of COVID, but
yeah.
I am dying to go there. One of my favorite places to visit is Japan. Love to go back there.
Amazing. Are you a man of faith?
No, at least not traditional.
So
I'm Jewish by ethnicity, but not religious.
Yeah, no, I wasn't asking about religion, but more of faith. But I get it. I'm not boring into that question because that's another 2-hour conversation.
We could, if we have 2 hours, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it. I really want to thank you very much. No more. Don't worry. No more questions.
I love ending on the controversial one. Like, oh yeah, wow, this is really going to test you.
But you are awesome, and I think everything you said on a strategic and tactical level about you actually produced a new roadmap for our listeners, and I really appreciate it. And guys, go to sparktoro.com and sign up for a free account and use it like Rad just said.
Itamar, thank you so much for having me. And to all the listeners, if I can be helpful to you or folks in your world, please don't hesitate to drop me a line. I'm Rand at sparktoro.com. And I'm pretty active on Twitter where I'm at Randfish.
Awesome. Thank you, Rand.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where we provide the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Your host has been Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com.